Greetings, salutations, and welcome back to the perpetual mess of my bedroom. This is where Hephaestus lives now while I'm not here, and just to update you all, I now have a unicorn head called Stanley. Yeah, so that's interesting. Anyway, back to the video at hand. Where were we last time? We finished off with Maz Kanata, who is now painted up. We glossed over her eyes to try and give them a bit more of a lens effect. I think that she came out decently well. Obviously my model painting skills need a lot of work, but that's okay. We also tried printing the Groot, and Groot looks happy, except he has a lot of striations and random lines. Some of these do seem to appear at a certain height, so I think it's a problem with the Z, but a lot of them are also random, and we're trying to narrow that down. Now, to print Arya, that was quite a struggle. We had 2 or 3 failures before this one, and what was happening was that the left-hand side lead screw was moving, while the right-hand side was jamming, and so it just got worse and worse and worse in tilt, until it completely messed up. So you can see that there are some pretty noticeable striations here. Printing in red does hide these because it's much more glossy colour, but this, quote, wood, which is actually just a kind of beigey filament, it brings out the details much better, which is nice, especially for all of this error checking. You can see there's, in general, it's really actually quite decent, but there is some randomization and striations that I really don't want to be seeing. And then, of course, Handsome Jack, because Handsome Jack rocks. So, with those out of the way, ways to fix this lead screw. One option is to sync up the 2 sides using a belt or something just to keep them all running nice and in sync. It's difficult to get belts in the right sizes. These ones I had to get specially, and I had to change my plans just so they would fit the belt. You can splice belts, but it is rather difficult, and having looked into it, it doesn't sound like a good idea, especially for such a small turning radius. The other option, which I really don't want to look into, just because it means a lot of extra money, is to use central lead screws again, and then use linear shafts. I would use silver steel just because that's the best metal for it. These are silver steel, and they will take absolutely forever to wear down. So yeah, I really don't want to do that just because of the amount I've actually invested in this system. Of course, they're running currently on the inside of the V slots, but there is a very slight amount of misalignment there. I did see a system that basically pushes Delrin pulley rods into the grooves and then runs on those and has very little friction. And that's something I'm looking into, and maybe a viable option for keeping these nice and tight while also moving. Previously, I was using these, and these are just old Meccano spacers. In here, holding the bed, I've put real ones on now, real springs. It seems to be making a tiny bit of a difference, and it's definitely more adjustable. These would compress, and then when you try to raise the bed again, they wouldn't fully decompress. So I was actually slowly squishing them smaller and smaller. So these springs should work a lot better. I've also decided that, seeing as this filament reel didn't work, what was happening was that when the head was on this side, it was printing nicely, but when I was on this side, it was actually pulling the filament a bit too taut, and the filament was rocking on that thin spindle. So that just wasn't working. So what I did instead was we put the filament on a Lazy Susan, a nicely oiled Lazy Susan. If I can get it decently taut here, a very, very tiny pull will send that moving. So that's working very nicely. I think that's actually the best solution I've seen so far. I've seen many of these other systems that are very much like a Lazy Susan, but then they've got filament guides, and that seems very unnecessary. The next step is, apart from fixing these lead screws, is to put in the 300mm bed system. And my 300mm bed is sitting in there. It's a 350 watt bed. The rest of the system is about 72. And to run all this, I can no longer use my 12 volt PSU, so I had to get a 24 volt one. This is 24 volts, 400 watts. I've printed this cover here, mainly to let more air through, as I will be using fans like that just to blast air through the system. Now, as you can see, we have 3 positive, 3 negative, ground, neutral, and live. Now those are all coming out the same end, which is different from that system, as we had power in there and power out there. Now, because this has only one 24 volt common, I'm having to drop it down, some for the ramps on this and some for the Octopi on this USB at 5 volts. Now, the interesting thing about the ramps board, and this isn't very clearly documented in a lot of the places that I've looked, is that it's actually decently easy to upgrade to 24 volts. At least part of it is. Now, what I'm going to be doing is, because I don't need my motors running at 24 volts, I'm just going to be upgrading the bed to 24 volts and the rest will run native 12 volts. Now, the power in for the bed is the one at the top here on this Phoenix connector, and that takes in 11 amps. And in fact, it's a pretty much direct line right through past this MOSFET and then to the power out for the bed. And basically all that is power through the MOSFET to control it. There's a little LED indicator in there to tell you that it's working. So basically what I'm going to be doing is a direct replacement, power in 24 volts, replace the fuses with some ones rated for 30 volts or 24 volts, but 30 is the closest I can get. And that's fine. Of course, the other thing is to make sure that the MOSFET in there can actually take the full 24 volts. It should. It's third-party one, so you have to make sure that it's safe and proper. So yeah, just check that before upgrading. And as for the Pi, instead of using this Octopi, I am going to be using a Pi Zero because it has a smaller profile, and as this is much larger, I do want to save space where I can. So the Pi Zero, I have already attached a Zero for you on, and this is a nice little breakout board that basically takes your input for the USB through 2 pogo connectors and breaks it out as 4, and it takes 2 power from the power in. And yeah, it basically just sits on the bottom of your unit and gives you 4 extra USB connectors, which is absolutely wonderful. So if you are thinking of using a Raspberry Pi, that is a must-do upgrade. So with that said, that's roughly what we are going to be doing from here on out. We'll keep you up to date, and I shall be going back to university next week, so my next video will be back at the flat. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I shall see you again next time. Goodbye.